Aubrey, sweetheart. Listen, make some room on that timeline, because the next 7 days of this rap game are about to snap in half. And this is the part they don't want you replaying. After months of tucking his chin, watching every other rapper drop an album and land face first in a puddle, Drake just popped back onto that live stream, adjusted his lens, cleared his throat, and swung directly at the throat of the empire. And when I tell you Aubrey aimed higher than he has ever aimed before, I mean it. Drake didn't shoot it up here. Drake shot at the building. Drake shot at Roc Nation. Drake shot at Jay-Z. And Drake, on camera, in high definition, in front of the entire internet, warned every last rapper in the game that his pen, is still soaking wet. So sit close, because the ledger just cracked open, and somebody's name is written at the very top of it. Now, before we walk into this fire, understand the moment. Drake had been quiet. Quiet in a way that felt strategic. Quiet in a way that felt like a man watching a chessboard, letting his opponents move first, letting Rick Ross post his numbers, letting the game do the game. And in that silence, Aubrey did what Aubrey does best. Aubrey dropped 3 albums on one night. 3. On one night. And while the timeline was still trying to metabolize that decision, Drake climbed back onto that live stream and started laughing. Laughing at flops. Laughing at rollouts. Laughing at the whole industry that had spent an entire year trying to declare him finished. And the first name Drake reached for was Rick Ross. Ross had just pushed out an album called Set in Stone. It did about 20,000 its first week. 20,000. And to be fair to Roswy, Ross has been running around the internet trying to explain those numbers, calling it a long game, calling it a slow burn, saying the streams are stacking, saying the culture will catch up. And you know what? He might actually be right. Because if you dig into the streaming report, Set in Stone has already crossed 63 million streams and climbed to something like 52,000 equivalent units. That's not a flop. That's a delayed detonation. And any real hip-hop listener knows the greatest albums in this culture didn't sell out the gate. Reasonable Doubt didn't sell out the gate. Illmatic didn't sell out the gate. Some of the most sacred bodies of work in this genre limped through their first weeks and became scripture later. So maybe the first week obsession really does need to die. But Drake wasn't in the mood for nuance. Drake was in the mood to laugh. And Drake laughed. He looked at Ross. He looked at the rest of them. And he said, in his own words, that these guys are dropping albums like Hello and Goodbye. Hello and Goodbye? Meaning, you showed up, you left, nobody clapped. Meaning, your project didn't even earn a headline before the timeline moved on. And that was the appetizer. Because right after that, Drake tilted his head, dropped his voice a half octave, and delivered the sentence that has the entire industry on tilt tonight. Drake said, and I quote, "Careful with that reply, because the pen isn't dry. The pen isn't dry." 6 words. 6 words that cracked the paint off the throne. Now, sweetheart, you understand what a line like that used to mean coming out of Aubrey's mouth. 2.5 years ago, if Drake told the culture his pen was still wet, entire artists would have moved their families out of the country. Entire artists would have deleted their catalog. Entire artists would have taken sabbaticals and picked up new hobbies. Drake was, at one point, the most feared writer in the mainstream. That is not up for debate. That is the tape. Push on the Family Feud. Push on Duppy Freestyle. Push on 2 birds, 1 stone. The man could write. The man could kill. The man could bury a career in 16 bars. Aubrey used to walk into a booth the way Michael Jordan used to walk into a locker room, with the belt already on his shoulder, with the crown already on his head, with the whole culture already assuming the outcome before the fight even started. That was Aubrey. That was the Aubrey we all grew up on. That was the Aubrey that made hip-hop bend to his release schedule. But this is 2026. And the moment those 6 words left his lips, the reaction was not fear. The reaction was laughter. The reaction was memes. The reaction was every single hip-hop commentator in the game reaching for the same rebuttal, and Aubrey, that rebuttal is the one you cannot outrun. Because the culture remembers. The culture remembers everything. The culture remembers that after the biggest battle of your career, after the biggest battle in modern rap history, after the culture told you to take the L and rebuild, you did not pick up the pen. You picked up the phone, and you called a lawyer, and you filed paperwork, and you walked into a courtroom and asked a judge to protect your feelings from a diss record. Aubrey, sweetheart, Aubrey, that is the shadow that stands behind every single threat Drake will ever make from this point forward. Every single one. It doesn't matter how sharp the bar is. It doesn't matter how cold the delivery is. It doesn't matter how many albums he drops in one night. The moment Drake threatens a rapper in 2026, the entire timeline responds with the same 3-word reply. See you in court. See you in court. See you in court. And that is a wound Aubrey inflicted on himself. Nobody did it to him. Nobody baited him into it. Nobody made him walk down that hallway, sign that filing, and hand it to a clerk. Aubrey did that. Aubrey chose that. And the moment he chose that, Aubrey traded his rap card for a plaintiff badge. And the culture will never fully hand the rap card back. But moving on, because it gets worse. Because Drake did not stop at Ricky Rosby. Drake sent a message to Roc Nation. Drake sent a message to Jay-Z. Drake sent a message to the biggest chair in the entire building. And the chair is not new to this. The chair has been rapping since Aubrey was in a wheelchair on a Canadian teen soap opera. And people inside that building are whispering that HOV has been waiting, patiently, professionally, expensively waiting, for exactly this kind of provocation. And now Aubrey just handed it to him wrapped in a bow, live, on stream, in front of millions. You have to understand what Drake is walking into. Jay-Z is not Kendrick. Jay-Z is not a peer. Jay-Z is not somebody who has to prove he can rap. Jay-Z owns the label that owns the tour that owns the streaming deal that owns the arena that Drake is trying to fill. Jay-Z is the ceiling and the floor. Jay-Z is the referee, the timekeeper, and the guy who counts the money after the show. And Drake looked directly at that man's operation and told him to be careful with his reply. Be careful. Be careful with your reply. Aubrey, look at me. Look at what you just did. You did not throw a jab at Jay. You handed Jay a permission slip. You handed HOV the moral authority he needed to speak. You handed HOV the excuse he had been waiting on. You gave him the frame, the timing, and the target. And when a man who has spent 30 years reading rooms is given the frame, the timing, and the target on a silver platter, that man does not miss. And HOV, being HOV, has already left breadcrumbs. Recently, on a stage at Roots Picnic, Jay-Z opened his mouth and casually dusted every rapper who has ever raised a voice at him in the last decade. Jay-Z said a rapper cannot be his opposition because the jig is up. Jay-Z said the chart champ needs to look up again because the real chart champ is on a completely different floor of the building. Jay-Z said them crackers got your publishing. Jay-Z said you are a worker in perpetuity. Aubrey, and this is important, Jay-Z did not name you in that verse. Jay-Z did not have to, because the entire room knew who he was talking about. And the entire room knew exactly which contract those bars were pointing to. So Drake was not walking into unclaimed territory when he said the pen isn't dry. Drake was walking into a trap HOV had already been laying, slowly, verse by verse, month by month, for the better part of a year. Now let's take a breath, because I need you to sit with the hypocrisy in the room. This is the part that separates the fans from the analysts. Aubrey wants to have his cake, and eat it too. Aubrey wants to threaten rappers with the ink of his pen while there is still ink drying on a lawsuit. That is not a diss. That is a contradiction. And every commentator worth their salt has already zeroed in on it. If Drake's pen is truly ready, then Drake owes the culture a syllabus. Drake owes Jay-Z a rule book. Drake owes Ricky Rosby a diagram. Because right now, the game does not know what is allowed and what is not allowed. Right now, the game does not know which bars will be answered with a verse and which bars will be answered with a summons. Right now, the game does not know if it's picking up a mic or picking up a subpoena. And a game that cannot tell the difference between those two things is not a game. It's a courtroom. And Aubrey turned it into one. And that is the crack in the throne. That is the crack. Because a rapper who threatens the courtroom and the pen in the same breath is not feared. A rapper who threatens the courtroom and the pen in the same breath is watched. Watched by lawyers. Watched by peers. Watched by every up-and-coming artist who used to look at Aubrey as the ceiling and now looks at Aubrey as the cautionary tale. Sweetheart, the blueprint has already been laid. Kendrick laid it. Jay-Z is about to reinforce it. And every single rapper who steps up to Drake from this point forward walks in with a receipt. Not a bar. A receipt. And Drake cannot subpoena a receipt. But let's rewind for a second, because there is a subplot that nobody is talking about, and this is where it gets fascinating. Drake is a foreigner. Drake is Canadian. Drake, at this exact moment in 2026, is still technically holding a life that lives on the right side of an American work visa. And while all of this is happening, the White House has been using Drake's own Iceman aesthetic as promotional material for the ICE deportation campaign. His flag, his imagery, his branding, ripped straight off his catalog and stitched onto federal deportation propaganda. And Aubrey has said nothing. Aubrey has posted nothing. Aubrey has liked nothing. Aubrey has issued no statement. Aubrey has not even reposted a meme. Silence. Complete silence. From the one rapper on this planet whose immigration status arguably intersects with the exact policy his likeness is now selling. Meanwhile, this same Aubrey has spent the last year dragging DJ Khaled for not speaking out about the war. Aubrey has spent the last year sniping at other artists for their silence on political issues. And Aubrey, sitting on that stream, telling other rappers to be careful with their reply, is the same Aubrey who cannot muster a 2-sentence Instagram note about a federal agency using his brand to justify deportations. The mirror. Aubrey, look at the mirror. Somebody in your camp has to show you the mirror. Because right now, the mirror is being held up by strangers on the internet, and the mirror is not flattering. The mirror is not kind. The mirror is showing a man who wants to be a warrior on stage and a civilian in a courtroom, a martyr in a caption and a millionaire in silence, a champion of the culture and a stranger to its most urgent political fight. That is not one man. That is two men. And the audience can see both of them at the same time now. Because this is why the dices don't land the same way anymore. This is why the pin isn't dry line got laughed at instead of feared. When a rapper's actions and words no longer align, the audience stops flinching. Every threat becomes theater. Every warning becomes an SNL sketch. And speaking of SNL, Aubrey, when you delivered that line, when you held up 4 fingers while saying 3, when you smirked into the camera and tried to make the ink of your pen sound biblical, the entire internet stood up and laughed. Because it wasn't menacing. It was cringe. It was a man dressed in double chrome cross basics and Cartier your grandmother would consider modest, telling Rock Nation to be careful. Sweetheart, there was a time in your career, Aubrey, when a line like that would have been carved into stone tablets. There was a time when it would have led an entire album cycle. There was a time when Complex would have written a 5,000-word cover story about it. And now it lives on the internet as a joke, as a punchline, as a clip that people share with the caption, "Please, someone tell him." Aubrey, please, someone tell you. Now this is the part where I need you to pay attention, because people inside that building are whispering something that has not made it to the front page of any blog. They're saying Jay-Z has been sitting on a verse. A verse. Not a subliminal. Not a stage freestyle. A verse. Recorded. Mixed. Mastered. Sitting in a hard drive somewhere in Tribeca. And they're saying the only reason it hasn't dropped is because Jay-Z wanted Drake to be the one to strike first. Because HOV is a chess player. Because HOV never punches first when he can punch second and win the round. And Aubrey just punched. Aubrey just threw the punch HOV was waiting on. And now, whether Aubrey wants to admit it or not, the countdown started the moment those 6 words left his mouth. HOV did not have to say anything. HOV did not have to post anything. HOV did not have to tweet, respond, address, deny, or acknowledge. HOV just had to wait. And Aubrey, on a live stream, in a room full of yes men, at the tail end of a moment he could not resist, walked directly into the box HOV built for him. Voluntarily. Cheerfully. On camera. In HD. And I don't think the general public understands what a Jay-Z Counter-Strike looks like in 2026. This is not Beanie Siegel yelling on a mixtape. This is not a Nas diss over a Kanye beat. This is a 60-something-year-old billionaire with the entire Rock Nation legal, marketing, and streaming apparatus behind him. This is a man who could put a diss verse on the front page of every DSP in the world within 12 minutes of releasing it. This is a man who owns the pipes the water flows through. Aubrey did not just poke a rapper. Aubrey poked the water supply. And now every drop that reaches Aubrey's mouth from this point forward is being poured by the man he just threatened. Think about that. Think about the architecture of that. Think about how many meetings Aubrey has had in his life where the other side of the table was, in some form, connected to that same building. Think about how many royalty statements have crossed Aubrey's desk with numbers that trace back, in some indirect way, to decisions made in a Rock Nation conference room. Think about how big the map actually is. And now think about how small Aubrey suddenly looks standing on it. Let me leak the ledger for a moment. Because there is a thing the industry does not say out loud. Every artist signed inside the Rock Nation ecosystem is currently watching this feud with the same expression on their face. Every one of them. Every management deal. Every publishing split. Every tour partnership. They are all doing the same math tonight. And the math says this. If Aubrey loses this round the way he lost the last one, the balance of power in this culture will not shift. The balance of power will collapse, because there will not be a mainstream rapper left standing who can credibly claim the throne. Kendrick took the belt. Jay owns the arena. And Drake, sweetheart, Drake becomes the guy who used to fill it. A Hall of Famer without a stadium. A superstar without a spotlight. A legend without a legacy that can still speak in the present tense. And that is the kind of fall that hip-hop does not unfall. Because hip-hop does not care how you got up. Hip-hop cares about where you are standing right now. And Aubrey is standing on a live stream telling the man who owns the building to be careful. But moving on, because we have not even touched Rick Ross yet. And Ross is the one who fired the first shot in this current round. Ross has been throwing quiet jabs at Drake for months. Ross has been posting the kind of subliminals that only work if the target notices. And Drake, being Drake, noticed. And Drake, being Drake, responded. But here's the twist. Ross's album is not actually flopping. Ross's album is doing exactly what Ross said it would do. It's climbing. 63 million streams. 52,000 units. Numbers that most rappers his age cannot dream of pulling in a first month. So the joke Drake tried to make about Ross's flop already has a comeback baked into it. The comeback is the streaming report. The comeback is the receipt. And Ross has already posted it. Ross is not the underdog in this story. Ross is the veteran who knew exactly how the trap would look before he stepped over it. And Ross is currently laughing all the way to a residual check, while Drake tries to figure out why the joke didn't land. And that is the theme of this entire moment, sweetheart. Every diss Drake fires in 2026 comes with a receipt attached. Every one. He disses Ross. Ross posts the numbers. He disses Kendrick. Kendrick posts the Grammys. He disses Jay-Z. Jay-Z posts the ownership documents. He disses the culture. The culture posts the courtroom. Aubrey is drowning in receipts, and every bar he writes just puts another one on the scale. And what he does not seem to understand, and what nobody in his camp seems willing to tell him, is that the internet in 2026 is a receipts economy. You do not win with charisma anymore. You do not win with cadence anymore. You do not win with vibes anymore. You win with paperwork. You win with proof. And Drake, at this exact moment, has almost no clean paperwork to hand the culture. His paperwork is a lawsuit. His paperwork is a subpoena. His paperwork is a filing. And a receipts economy will always crown the artist with the cleaner ledger. Now let's talk about what is really going to happen. Because I have watched this exact type of build-up unfold 3 times in the last 3 years, and the pattern is unmistakable. Step 1, Drake threatens. Step 2, the internet laughs. Step 3, the target responds sideways, never head-on. Step 4, Drake escalates. Step 5, Drake overreaches. Step 6, Drake overreaches too far. Step 7, the receipt drops. And the receipt is always the same kind of receipt. It is always a document. It is always a text message. It is always a story from somebody who used to work in the room. And it is always the exact thing Aubrey did not want the audience to see. That is the pattern. That is the trap. That is the shape of this thing every single time. And Aubrey, at step 1 right now, has already given the world exactly the kind of clip that step 7 feeds on. So if you are asking me, and you did not, but I am telling you anyway, what happens in the next 30 days? Here is my read. Roc Nation does not respond right away. Roc Nation lets the pin isn't dry clip cook on the timeline for another week. Roc Nation lets every commentator, every blog, every podcast run the hypocrisy angle until the frame is set in cement. And then, at the exact moment Drake believes the news cycle has moved on, HOV drops a verse. Not a diss track. A verse. On somebody else's song. Buried in the middle of a feature. And in that verse, Jay-Z says one line. One line, sweetheart. One line. That reframes the entire feud. The way HOV did it to Prodigy. The way HOV did it to Nas. The way HOV did it to Cam. One line. And Aubrey spends the next 6 months trying to answer it. That is how a chess player wins. That is how a chess player has always won. And Aubrey, in his current form, is not playing chess. Aubrey is flipping the board. And you cannot flip the board on a man who owns the board, the table, and the room the table is sitting in. Sweetheart, there is no version of that outcome that ends well. There is no version of that outcome where Aubrey walks away with the belt. There is no version of that outcome where Aubrey looks like the winner in the year-end retrospectives. There is only a version where Aubrey learns, very publicly and very slowly, that the pen he brought to this fight was not the pen the fight required. And by the time he figures that out, the game will have already moved on to the next headline. But this is bigger than Drake. This is bigger than Jay-Z. This is a moment where hip-hop as a culture is finally choosing what kind of sport it wants to be. Because for the last 3 years, hip-hop has been trying to decide whether beef belongs in the booth or belongs in the courtroom. And every time a major rapper picks the courtroom, the culture loses a piece of itself. Every time. Battle rap is one of the last remaining forms of American folk art that still runs on words alone. Words, wit, rhythm, courage. And when the biggest rapper in the mainstream turns those words into evidence in a civil suit, the entire genre takes a step backward. Aubrey, and I say this with love, sweetheart, Aubrey did that. Aubrey put a scar on the ribcage of hip-hop that will not heal fast. And every single artist under the age of 25 is going to grow up watching that scar and internalizing the lesson it teaches and calibrating their own careers around it. That is the legacy Aubrey handed himself. A generation of rappers who now hesitate before they punch, because they saw what happened when the biggest of them all decided to punch back with paperwork. And this is why so many veterans in the culture, from 50 Cent to Meek Mill to Jamie Foxx, and everybody in between, keep circling back to the same critique. It is not about whether Drake can rap. Everybody knows Drake can rap. It is about whether Drake can lose. It is about whether Drake can take an L on the chin and stand back up. Because the culture forgives everything except thinning skin. The culture forgives beef. The culture forgives failure. The culture forgives mistakes. But the culture does not forgive a rapper who tries to erase his loss by legal filing. That is a stain. And that stain is now stapled to every future move Drake makes. Every album, every single, every tour, every live stream, every guest verse, every interview, every Instagram post, every threat, every warning, every pin isn't dry line. That stain travels with him now, and no marketing budget in the world can wash it off. So when Drake climbs on a stream and says the pin isn't dry, the response is not fear. The response is a question. The response is, which pin, Aubrey? The pin you write bars with, or the pin you sign paperwork with? Because those are two different pens now, and the culture is watching to see which one you reach for next. If you reach for the bar pen, the culture will respect you again. If you reach for the paperwork pen, the culture will finish burying you. That is not a threat. That is a diagnosis. Sweetheart. And a diagnosis, unlike a threat, does not care whether you agree with it. A diagnosis is a description of a condition. And Aubrey's condition, right now, is that he has two pins and the wrong instinct about which one to pick up. And here is the meta loop that nobody is closing. Because behind all of this, behind the Ross flop that wasn't, behind the Jay-Z ownership bars, behind the pin isn't dry warning, there is a shadow that has been circling Aubrey's camp for the better part of a year. And that shadow has a name. That shadow is the Roc Nation subpoenas. The subpoenas that came down during the height of the Kendrick battle. The subpoenas that dragged Roc Nation executives into paperwork Aubrey filed. The subpoenas that never fully resolved on camera. And now, the man who runs Roc Nation is standing on stages in his home city, dusting Aubrey without saying his name, and Aubrey is standing on streams telling him to be careful with the reply. Sweetheart, Aubrey, that is not a diss. That is an invitation. That is you handing Jay-Z the exact grievance he was hoping you would voice out loud, on camera, on record, so that his response, whatever form it takes, has a clean, documented target. And that target is you. That target has always been you. You just made it easier for the shot to line up. And that, more than anything, is what makes this moment so dangerous for Drake. Because Aubrey is not fighting a peer. Aubrey is fighting a man who plays the long game with a decade-long time horizon. A man who has watched empires rise and fall from a suite. A man who has already survived the biggest litigation storm of his life and walked out of it clean. And Aubrey, in one live stream, may have just triggered the second chapter of that man's revenge tour. This is not a diss track summer. This is a chessboard summer, and the pieces are already moving. Every square on that board is being touched by an invisible hand right now, and Aubrey is the only one at the table who cannot see the hand moving. He thinks he is playing a solo game. He is playing 4 opponents at once, and 3 of them are silent. So let's zoom out, because I know some of you came here for the tea and stayed for the analysis, and I appreciate you for that. What we are witnessing right now is a rare, once-in-a-decade fracture in the rap food chain. Drake at the top, Kendrick on the other end. Jay-Z, behind the curtain. Ross, on the sidelines. Meek Mill, in the wings. 50 Cent, laughing on Instagram. Diddy, silent for reasons the internet already knows. And the entire culture leaning forward, waiting to see which name gets called next. This is the moment historians will point to in 10 years and say, that is where the throne cracked. That is where the pyramid rearranged itself. That is where the biggest star in mainstream rap made the mistake he could not walk back. Aubrey, this is that moment. And you are the one holding the hammer. If Aubrey were smart, and Aubrey, historically, has been very smart when he wants to be, Aubrey would take this next week off. Delete the stream clip. Retract the pin isn't dry line. Post a family photo. Reset the tone. Because right now, every second that clip stays up is another second the industry has to prepare its counter. Every second is another commentator writing the hypocrisy segment. Every second is another blog editor drafting the headline. And Aubrey, if you're listening, you are running out of seconds. Every live stream you do from now until HOV responds is another opportunity for you to say something worse. Every joke you make is a potential punchline in somebody else's verse. Every threat you deliver is a potential bar in somebody else's diss. And you, of all people, should know how quickly the internet turns a moment into a monument. But you probably won't take my advice. You probably won't take anybody's advice. Because that is what has always separated Aubrey from every other artist in his class. Aubrey does not have anyone in his camp willing to tell him no. Aubrey does not have anyone in his camp willing to say, hey, that line is going to get us dragged. Aubrey does not have anyone in his camp willing to be the mirror. And that is why, on stream after stream, We watch him repeat the same mistake in slightly different outfits. The double chrome cross. The grandmother Cartier. The four fingers when he says 3. It is the same movie every time. Only the lighting changes. Only the wardrobe changes. Only the caption changes. The plot is identical. Aubrey climbs on a stream. Aubrey makes a joke. Aubrey overreaches. Aubrey delivers a threat. The internet clips the moment. The internet laughs. The clip goes viral. Aubrey doubles down. Aubrey triples down. Aubrey turns the clip into a caption on his next post. And by the time the smoke clears, Aubrey is standing exactly where he started, with one more receipt in the pile. So what does Nicki do? What does Ross do? What does Kendrick do? What does Jay-Z do? What does the culture do? Sweetheart, that is the real question, and it is the question I want you to answer. Because right now, hip-hop is standing at a crossroads, and every major player is watching to see who moves first. Aubrey drew the line in the sand. Aubrey said the pen isn't dry. Aubrey warned Roc Nation. Aubrey warned Jay-Z. And now Roc Nation, Jay-Z, and the entire rest of the game get to decide whether to respect that warning, laugh at that warning, or bury that warning under a verse so cold that the pen isn't dry line becomes a punchline for the next 20 years. And I already know how this ends. I have seen this movie before. I have seen it 3 times. And every single time, the man who threatened the courtroom lost the culture. Every single time. Trust me, the ground is already moving. And I don't think Aubrey has any idea how far it's about to slide. Because when a man who owns the arena decides to walk down from the suite and pick up a mic, the whole building holds its breath. And the building is holding its breath right now. You can feel it. You can feel it in every timeline. You can feel it in every group chat. You can feel it in the way every hip-hop podcast this week suddenly has the same headline. Something is coming. Something big is coming. And Aubrey lit the match himself. That is the part he does not seem to understand. Nobody lit this match for him. Nobody baited him into this. Nobody set him up. He walked to the corner of the room, picked up the match, struck it against the wall, and held it to his own curtain. And now he is standing in the middle of a room that is starting to smoke, wondering out loud who could have possibly done this. So here is where I leave you, sweetheart. 2 paths. Aubrey can take the road every legend before him has taken. He can step off the stream, sharpen the pen, the real pen, and answer HOV the way rappers answered HOV in the 90s and early 2000s. Bar for bar. No lawyers. No subpoenas. No paperwork. Just the pen. Just the booth. Just the culture. Or Aubrey can do what Aubrey has been doing. He can lean on the legal team. He can lean on the streaming numbers. He can lean on the 4 fingers for 3 theatrics. He can lean on the double chrome basics. And Aubrey can watch, in real time, as the throne he has spent 15 years building gets renovated with him still inside it. And here is the thing about that second path, Aubrey. You do not get to choose when the renovation ends. You do not get to choose which walls get knocked down. You do not get to choose which floor you get placed on when the dust settles. That decision belongs to the man who owns the building. And that man is not you. That man has never been you. And that man, tonight, is watching this exact clip on a screen in a suite you cannot afford to sit in. There is one more thing I need to say before I let you go, sweetheart, because it has been sitting on my chest for the entire duration of this monologue, and I refuse to let this video end without saying it out loud. Aubrey, you were supposed to be the peace treaty. You were supposed to be the artist who proved that hip-hop could reach every corner of the globe, could sell out every stadium on every continent, could dominate every streaming platform, could turn every subgenre into a Drake feature, and could still remain rooted in the culture that raised it. You were supposed to be the ambassador. You were supposed to be the bridge. You were supposed to be the guy who took hip-hop from the corner to the boardroom without losing the corner along the way. And for a long time, Aubrey, you were exactly that. You were the bridge. You were the ambassador. You were the peace treaty. And then, in one battle, in one loss, in one filing, you became something else. Something the culture never asked you to become. And now every time you climb on a stream and threaten a rapper, the culture flinches for the wrong reason. Not because the pen is dangerous. Because the paperwork is. That is what changed, sweetheart. That is the seismic shift underneath all of this. That is the invisible earthquake nobody is naming out loud. Drake did not stop being Drake because he lost a battle. Drake stopped being Drake because he tried to unlose a battle. And you cannot unlose a battle. Nobody can. You can only lose it, learn from it, and get back up. But the moment you try to unlose it, you turn every future win into a footnote and every future loss into a scandal. That is Aubrey's condition right now. That is the actual diagnosis. Every future Drake win comes with a footnote. Every future Drake loss comes with a scandal. And the pen isn't dry line.